I'm your host, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Let's begin. When I left the hospital, I said, look, there's two things I want to do. There's an intelligence within me that's given me life, that's keeping my heart beating, digesting my food, organizing all these functions. It's got a mind much bigger than my mind. I don't know how to do any of those things. I can't heal this body, but it can. So I came up with the idea like, well, if the power that made the body heals the body, then I just got to make contact with this intelligence. And once I make contact with it, I got to give it a plan, a template, a design. I got to let it know what I want, get very clear on my intention, and then I got to surrender it to a greater mind and allow it to do the healing for me. So that was the first thing I said. The second thing I said is I'm not going to let any thought slip by my awareness that I don't want to experience. Now, that sounds really good from a philosophical standpoint.
Very, very challenging.
But when you're facing paralysis, I would start my inner work and start reconstructing my spine, and the next thing you know, I start thinking about living in a wheelchair. I'd stop and have to start all over again because that wasn't what I wanted. That was the wrong signal I was giving it. I'd start again, and the next thing you know, I'd be thinking, should I sell my practice? Should I sell my home? There I go again, back to the other ideas. So it was a constant practice, and then I would get frustrated and get impatient, and then it got worse. And so it took me sometimes 3 to 4 hours every day to go through that inner work, and it wasn't easy. But after that 6-week period of time, I started getting better at paying attention. And paying attention is being present, and it's a skill. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And right around this time, what was taking me 3 or 4 hours to do, all of a sudden it started getting easier. It started taking less time. And once I started seeing that, I knew that I was firing and wiring new circuits in my brain, and I was getting better at paying attention. And now, when I finished it, I felt like I hit a tennis ball right in the sweet spot. I felt like I hit a golf ball just right. Something would just start clicking. And that's when I knew that I was developing some skills. So I mean, think about it. You're with your best friends, and they're all sitting around the hospital bed, and you're in trouble in your life when they tap you on the shoulder or give you a hug and say, we know you'll make the right decision, which really means I'm so glad I'm not you. So it was a really a powerful initiation for me in my life, because it was really, I had to weigh what I knew against what I didn't know, and I'm so glad I didn't have the surgery, because I don't have any pain in my back, and I live a normal life now. I went through a dark night of the soul that first 6 weeks, because when you're in a dark night of the soul, I think you realize that nobody has the answers to your life but you. And no one knows what it's like to be you, because they're not you, and you might as well not even ask them, because they're going to give you their experience instead of your own. So when I was getting frustrated and I was getting impatient and losing my cool, I noticed that my focus got worse. But when I started getting really grounded and I started really trusting and started surrendering and playing with it a little bit more, I wanted to get from the beginning of my rehearsal of reconstructing my spine all the way to the end without taking a turn off on the wrong exit. And so all the times that I had been practicing were the times that I was actually changing. So all of those moments led up to that one moment where I started and I went to the end, and when I finished, I was able to hold my focus. I didn't wander anywhere in my mind, and there was a physical sensation in my body that felt right. It felt good. I felt connected. It felt like I knew what I was doing was working. And then the moment I had that connection, from that point on, when I started noticing the changes taking place in my body outside of me, I started paying attention to what I was doing inside of me, but now I did it with more passion.
I had momentum.
More music. Yeah, I was connected. Now I knew. Now it's just like all the work you do and training for anything. Because in the beginning it's really hard, but then when it starts getting easier and starts getting fun, you start enjoying it, and that's what happened. I started looking forward to my meditations. I couldn't wait to get back in there and refine it a little bit more. It was just my world. I mean, I had nowhere to go. I wasn't going to go. I couldn't train. I couldn't go. I was laying face down, and just just working with myself. And so it was a great time. It was a difficult time, but I learned a lot about myself and a lot about the healing process along the way. Well, look, I mean, I'm not a traditional guy that takes things from any religious sect, any tradition, any culture. I think when you do that, you tend to divide an audience. I mean, I'm a scientist, and I think science is the contemporary language of mysticism. I think science demystifies the mystical. And the moment you start talking religion or culture or tradition, you divide an audience, but science creates community. So you combine a little quantum physics with a little neuroscience, a little neuroendocrinology, a little psychoneuroimmunology, a little epigenetics. All of those sciences point the finger at possibility, but not in an intimidating way, in a simple way. So our meditations that we teach are not meditations where you're going to sit and contemplate your navel. It's not just what we do. We're science-based. We know what words, we know what things, what activities create more coherence in the brain and the heart. We know what it takes to alter a person's states. We've measured it thousands and thousands of times. So in our meditations, we start off by telling everybody, look, you already know how to do this. You just forgot because you're too busy and too distracted. And most people, to finish the thought from our last conversation, wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or loss to finally change. It's got to get so bad that they no longer feel like themselves any longer, that they can see what they look like for the first time. So everybody that's listening on this call has done something great in their life. And what did they do? They got a wild idea. They got a new idea. They asked themselves a question like, what would it be like to be healthy? What would it be like to be wealthy? What would it be like to be in a new relationship? What would it be like to be happy? The moment they ask that question, they turn on the creative center in their brain. They turn on their frontal lobe. Now, frontal lobe's got to get busy creating. So it's got to use the raw materials in the brain. It's got to use the circuits of things you've learned intellectually or philosophically and the things you've experienced in your life. So the frontal lobe's got to answer the question. So it looks out over the landscape of the brain and it starts activating different circuits. And when it seamlessly pieces it together, you get a vision in your mind that's called an intention. Now, a passionate person who has that vision, the thought in their mind becomes the experience. They start to feel the emotion as if they're already there ahead of the event. And when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, you're changing your energy, you're changing your neurocircuitry, you're changing your chemistry, you're changing your genetic expression. You're no longer living in your past. In that moment, you're living in your future. So being defined by a vision of the future is what our work is about instead of the memories of the past. So what should they do then? Write down the choices you got to make and make sure you commit them to memory. Review the things you got to do. Review the behaviors. Think about the experiences, your goals in that future and how they feel. And keep reviewing them. Keep your conscious mind on them. Now, the most important thing is to review the thoughts that you don't want to think. You know, I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, this won't work for me, it's my mother's fault, it's my father's fault, it's my ex's fault, I don't feel like it, whatever it is. Write those thoughts down and become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you would never go unconscious or believe them again. Write down the choices you got to stop making. Think about the things you no longer want to do, the habits you got to break, the experiences you got to stay away from that are connected to certain people in certain places, and the emotions that are going to bring you to a lower denominator. And you got to become so conscious of that 95% of where most people live that you won't go unconscious and return back to the old self. That's the work right there. So that process is what we all innately are wired to do anyway. It's just that you got to make the time to do it. And that's the key right there. Most people don't want to make the time.